Well, hello and welcome. Welcome to another episode of the Imperfect Men's Club podcast. My name is Mark Aylward, and I'm here with my good friend, colleague, and co host, Jim Gurley. And it is the beginning of January 2025. We skipped last week, Jim, as we talked about earlier, because, holidays and such. And now we wake up to what we're both kind of giggling about, which is what we're calling a paradigm shift, and that's going to be the topic of today. I think it's going to be very easy to connect to the wheel of life and the five areas for sure. But I think that, what's interesting, and you can comment about this when I pass the mic back to you, Jim. But when you mentioned the topic to me earlier today, I'm like, dude, that's exactly what I was thinking about talking about. So that's kind of cool. And Jim, as he does, got me the definition of a paradigm shift. So, in terms of what does that mean, let me read the definition that you found on Google because I think it's certainly sufficient. A paradigm shift is a fundamental change in the way we think about or do something. It's a complete change in perspective, a new way of seeing the world. Some examples are the shift from Earth centered to sun centered model of the solar system back in the day, the invention of the internet, which is more obviously more recent, and the subsequent shift in how we communicate and access information. And I suppose, Jim, you could throw a more recent example of AI in there and
hmm
mix the whole thing up.
hmm
But yeah, fascinating topic. So much evidence of multiple paradigm shifts. And the other interesting thing that you brought to my attention again is the difference between the world in which you live, California, more of a liberal area, and the world in which I live, which is Florida, which is more conservative. And we'll bring that back into the conversation as it's relevant. But yeah, great topic, Jim. Very excited to talk about it. You said you had some examples. I don't know what you wanted to start off with.
Yeah. Hey, happy New Year to you, Mark. And yeah, it's very appropriate for the first episode of 2025, right? I think we got to be getting close to 70 episodes, or if
80 something.
we're in the 80s. Nice. So,
I think this
yeah.
is actually the start of season 4, by the way.
Oh, very cool. Okay,
Yeah.
good to know. So yeah, another paradigm shift, right? It's appropriate, and I also again always appreciate when you bring it back into what we call the flywheel of life, right? And that's and the center of that is our self, and starts with self-awareness, self-reflection, a lot of selves, and then the five areas of our life, which no particular order, but our health, mental health, physical health, our profession, whether you're an entrepreneur or an employee for a company, our relationship with others, wife, mother, women, father, all those different things, and our relationship with money, abundance versus scarcity, and the one that will probably stay in this spoke most today, but it doesn't necessarily have to apply just to this, and that's worldview, and how the paradigm shift of 2024 is already taking effect. And I think we both have some interactions or conversations that we've had just in the past, 4 weeks or ever since the election, and it's positive. So far so good. You can just feel people a little more upbeat, a little more relieved that things are going to be okay. And yeah, so let's get into it. I do also, like I said, this doesn't have to be about politics. I have a list here, so let's go through these, and then of course always appreciate your opinion of these different. But if we just did a quick history in since you and I have been part of this podcast, or we started this, it was kind of around the COVID time, right? So think
Hmm.
of the paradigm shift just in COVID, and how that changed everything from then on in terms of how people interact. It wasn't for that technology, we wouldn't be doing this podcast, right? A Zoom world that we now live in. What a paradigm shift that was. I can see, uh, like everything in a paradigm shift, there's good and there's bad, but mostly good, probably, to get away from a 40-hour work week, a 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. I think the other one that I'm starting to appreciate more is this. 2020 BLM, what I call DEI uh, moment in time, and how
Mm-hmm.
that um, really, in my opinion, did not meet the objective. Let's just say it divided us, and it's good to see that that's changing, or we're adjusting to that. I think that the 2020 election, obviously, versus the 2024 election, and AI, it is such a game changer in 2024. And I'll just call it the year of Chat GPT, but it's really more how it's going to become part of every part of our life, and embedded in everything we do for good, in my opinion. So that's my list. What are your
Yeah, no,
thoughts?
it's good. I mean, there's so many ripples off of all of those topics. If I were to just take COVID and go back, and I've told you the story about the day that I recognized that COVID was a thing
Hmm.
when I was walking into a store and the guy said, "You can't come in here unless you have a mask." And I asked him, "Do you have any masks?" And he said, "Yeah, they're $3." And to me, that's the whole thing. It's like it started by, and I think this has been going on for a long time. I don't think we want to lose sight of that the government doesn't always tell us the
Hmm.
truth about stuff. And
Yeah.
sometimes they're trying to protect, people from rioting. Sometimes they don't really know yet and they're doing research.
Hmm. Hmm.
Sometimes. But
Hmm.
the concept of the government misleading us. I mean, if you
Yeah.
don't understand that that's been a reality for a long time, then you got your head in the sand, right? Number one.
Yes.
Number two, it really, in reflecting back on it, which hindsight's always 2020. It's like I feel like I knew what this was right away, and I don't say that for credit or I told you so or anything like that. I just will never forget that moment when the guy said, "Yeah, they're $3." I'm like, "Are you fucking kidding me?" Like,
Yeah.
I don't mind wearing the mask, but you're going to make money off me. And like, what is this COVID thing? I can't go into the store to buy a steak. Like, what the fuck? And
Yeah.
so it really, really rocked me. And then it all started to unfold over years and years and years. And so, but that was and I think all of the other paradigm shifts that we've talked about and hopefully will continue to talk about on this podcast and moving forward, to me, they all have to do with large institutions, primarily government
Hmm.
institutions,
Hmm.
either getting away with things or misleading us about the reality of things. And when you bring up, you were graciously
Yeah,
politically
yeah.
polite.
No, stay with. I don't want to interrupt you, but I want to, let's go on COVID, and then we'll move on to the next ones, because we could
Okay.
check these off. But I could not agree with you more. It wasn't the COVID; it's how our government responded to COVID. And now, you could call it hindsight. I could call it reflection, because we have data. It's
Mm-hmm.
not political any longer. We have hard data that these decisions they made, maybe with, I like to believe, with very good intentions, right? And anybody that's been in a position of decision in a crisis situation, you got to make a call. So I'd like to think that our politicians initially did those things to protect us, but clearly, after you went into year two, year three, it became very, very obvious that these politicians were using this for a power play, and they abused their power. Particularly here in California, we were on um, they call it special arrangements. I forgot the term, but a governor could, as long as you're in this status, you don't have to go. You don't need Congress. You don't need to take votes. So there's a number of governors, of course, blue governors, throughout the country, that held on to this power and abused it. In my opinion, that as a result, we have this mistrust for government, and of course, that was at the federal level, and then it trickled down to the state level. So yeah, I really um, appreciate you talking about COVID as not as the health risk or the health crisis. It was a breakdown in government trust to the public. That's obviously our opinion. So, but yeah, now let's move on. Like you said, that's COVID. What are your thoughts about BLM, and I'll throw BLM and DEI, because I do think it's become one of the same, and we can look back now for almost 4 years and reflect on it.
Yeah, I'd like to look back on the date that I wrote the article on LinkedIn. Diversity hiring is cowardice. But again, Jim, contextually speaking, I'm in the talent acquisition space, right? So
Yeah.
I'm playing with human
Yeah.
resources and hiring and how people get hired. I mean, it's in my blood.
Yeah.
So it's particularly offensive to me that
Yeah.
what someone looks like or what
Hmm.
God they
Yeah.
pray to or what country they're from or what gender they are has anything to do with whether you should hire
Hmm.
them or not was just so absurd to me the first time I heard it. I got angry. I was like, what the
Hmm.
fuck are you talking about? This is like exactly what we don't want, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
And then it just tumbled down and down and down with
Hmm.
math and statistics and all the stories about you want the best pilot on your plane or you want the diversity hire, you want the best heart surgeon on the table or do you want the diversity hire? It's like, go to team sports, pick a professional game,
Well,
tell me where diversity works. It doesn't
y-
anywhere.
well, you mentioned math that you don't want to include any logical math in these calculations because that math didn't work, and I
No.
think that's why eventually it became unbelievable, and that's why many companies announced in the last few weeks that they're moving away from that. So
I heard McDonald's dropped everything yesterday or the day before.
yeah, let's so again, that is a paradigm shift in uh, and again a loss of trust and credibility with leaders. And I'm not talking about just government leaders. I'm talking about the CEOs of these companies that made these decisions. They went along with it either by fear or by well, the worst pandering to a
Yeah, yeah, that was the most unbecoming thing for me. It's like, how can you sit in the C-suite chair making
yeah,
$50 million a year and actually try to lead me to
yeah,
believe that I'm actually going to listen to this bullshit? This is contrary to everything you've ever stood for your whole life. It's
yeah,
contrary to how you got where you are right now. Now I'm just insulted. And that was an overriding emotion for me throughout all these paradigm shifts, Jim. It's like, that's insulting, right?
yeah, yeah. What are some of the events? I know that I remember the was it the Harvard um, gal, right? The president or the
Gay. Yeah. I
yeah,
can't
yeah, gay.
remember her.
So there was a number of events that changed this paradigm in 2024, and yeah, so we're seeing the result of that.
Well, you know what I think it was, Jim? And it seems to me to still be going on, maybe why we're talking about it. It was a domino effect. It's like the
Hmm.
first domino had to fall, and I don't know which one it was, probably COVID. Maybe not. I mean, I'd have to go back and look and do some research to figure out where the first domino was. But man, once the first one fell over, and listen to us now. How
Hmm.
many people do we know now that are comfortable talking about the fact that they like Donald Trump? How many people now are talking about the fact that they do believe in freedom of speech? How many
Hmm.
people now are saying, you know what? If you come into the country, there's a process for that. And if you don't go through the process, you are illegal. And if on top of that, you've already killed some folks, we're getting you the fuck out of here. People are
Yeah,
talking about this stuff now that didn't want to even get close to the topic 6 months ago. And I think that's
yeah,
progress.
yeah. I think the other one we were talking about this in the pregame was the paradigm shift when we discovered that the government uh, was colluding with these tech companies. At the time it was Twitter and even Facebook at the time, right? How they were outright got caught colluding messages or even worse, preventing information to getting out to the public. I think that was a paradigm shift more than we realized that obviously showed up in this past election. But that's not a political conversation. That was not a political incident. That was a factual report that Matt Taibbi, right? That was his name that wrote that report. That was
Taibbi, yeah, yeah, no, he
Taibbi.
was.
That's
It
what.
was.
Yeah,
There was a lot of bravery in these paradigm shifts, and I think the
yeah.
people that started the shifts, depending on what category, whether it was COVID or immigration or DEI or whatever, yeah, there are heroes at the beginning of these shifts because they were the ones that everyone was throwing stones at when they were talking about who Donald Trump was or why there's a process for immigration, or why, the DEI doesn't make sense mathematically or scientifically or culturally or anything. Those people were called. It was like the Salem witch hunt, right? They were
Mhm.
like burned at the stake, or tried to be burned at the stake. And now look where we are. We
Yeah.
feel free to talk about all these things, for the most part. When
Right. But that time period was not just BLM. There was COVID information withheld. There was all kinds of statistics and stats that they were uh, blocking to get out to the general public. That we
yeah, well,
find that yeah.
the border is secure. You
Well,
know,
I'm even going back to COVID. Like
all of it.
the mask and vaccines and just the amount of information that they were preventing to balance out that conversation was revealed without question. And I'll never forgive. And something I'll have to give you credit for. I don't like to, but you said it years ago. It's always about politics. Well, you were right, because there were so-called blue team members that said, I can't participate in this any longer. This makes no sense. I am switching to the other side. And there's a
Hmm.
lot of them, because they got caught abusing their power and outright lying. Not that the other team doesn't lie, but the blue team that was in power, obviously the Biden administration, outright lied. Well, I don't want to get into the.
Well, here's another observation, Jim, and I think that, again, hindsight being 2020, it's like, well, how, when the shit hits the fan, or the door gets opened, or whatever is exposed, and we collectively begin to say, yeah, I guess this doesn't make sense, whether it's freedom of speech or gun control or immigration or COVID, or it doesn't matter.
Mhm.
When that conversation begins, it's interesting to see how the people that lied about this stuff
Mhm.
are, number one, being held accountable, if at all, and number two, explaining themselves. And
Yeah.
that's I think that's in front of us. I think that's
Well, it's
happening.
happening. No,
Yeah.
it's absolutely happening. So, like I said, let's go beyond the U.S. If you look at Europe, particularly Italy and now Germany and even Canada, that paradigm shift is happening as we speak. Right?
Hmm.
Didn't Trudeau step down yesterday or the day before?
Yeah.
Yeah.
the, the,
What a
gov- the,
weenie
go-
that guy is, isn't he?
the governor of Canada.
Yeah. But uh, so yeah, this is not just a U.S.
No.
Paradigm shift.
No,
This
but it's
is
it's I think it's a testament to the power of the United States' reputation, because I think what Donald Trump has done, with the cooperation of his minions, because it's not a one-man job, is given the world permission to start moving this ball in the right direction again, because they wanted us to start moving our ball first, in
yeah.
my estimation. You
I
know.
I yeah, I would agree. I think like many things, the U.S. is is on the forefront of they 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 can move that pendulum either direction, and that clearly has changed, and you're seeing it in everyday conversations and everyday um, events, the ripple effect of that throughout the world. So
Yeah, yeah, no, it's widespread, and it's very interesting to me. It's actually rather confusing to me. I'm not exactly sure how it's all going to end up. Maybe none of us are yet. But I just, every day I wake up for the last, I don't know, few weeks, few months, there's a new piece of information that another paradigm has either begun shifting, or is in the process of completing its shift. And
mhm.
it's crazy. It's
Yeah,
crazy, you
yeah,
know.
yeah. The other reason that what inspired this topic today about paradigm shift is the recent news about the fire in Pacific Palisades,
Mm-hmm.
Southern California. Um, yeah, it's I haven't checked news all day, but last night it was not good, and it's personal because my sister-in-law and brother-in-law and their uh, junior in high school and a ninth grader, I think, live right in the middle of it, and it's I went practically there twice this past year, and recently, it's not just one of the most beautiful. areas in the world, as far as the area, but it brings back memories of the Oakland fire, which my wife's um, father and mother lost their home, her childhood home that she grew up in.
Wow.
So when you talk about a paradigm shift, when I just, well, you've experienced some natural catastrophes yourself this year, right? Your daughter's in North Carolina, right?
Asheville. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, just the impact that the paradigm shift that it has in the area that those people live in, it is remarkable. If last night is what I saw continues, did you see the photographs of the tractors coming through and just pushing the cars out of the way because the cars that were people were trying to get out, 30,000 people were trying to get out,
Yeah.
and they had their traffic was so bad they had to get out of their cars and start running.
Hmm.
Yeah. And then yeah, so luckily we got a text at about 3 o'clock and they had got out in their cars, two separate cars with their
Good.
children. So
That's
they're
good. Yeah.
okay.
No,
But
I saw that, and then I also saw that there was an earthquake in around Tibet in Nepal, where I have a good friend from. So I was going to
wow.
ping you, but I knew we were going to talk right now, so I figured we'd cover that then. I'm glad everyone's okay. But
Yeah.
yeah, our
Well, we
response,
don't
I
know.
think,
That's just that will be a major paradigm shift because it's not just the homes that are lost. It's the lives and the schools and the businesses and everything. It's just a major paradigm shift in
well, it's going to be interesting to see what comes of the causal nature of these things as well, because I know with the grand poobah Newsom, it was always about climate change and things that were maybe but not necessarily related, deforestation, the water supply, how you guys handle all these things. I don't think anybody really can answer the question, why did this happen yet? And
Yeah, it was a
but I
hundred
hope they
mile an hour
pursue.
winds from what I heard. That is there's nothing anybody can do once that gets going. Especially if if I saw it, I experienced it, right? You just you have to remember nothing's flat. There's hills, so the fire and the wind is getting. It's like a torch. You can't. There's nothing that could stop it.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. It's terrible.
yeah.
No, it's
So,
it's terrible. I think that if to dig back into this notion that a paradigm shift is a fundamental change in the way we think about or do something, maybe the biggest paradigm shift for me, and it's a shift. It's not a complete change of stance because I was always
mhm.
skeptical of the government. But it's like if someone tells you something, and I think this is a lesson to teach young people about communication. I think you have to start the conversation by thinking about things like, well, who's telling me this? What is their motivation for telling me this? Do they have an ulterior motive? What do they potentially gain from me believing this way or that way? And I don't think we do enough rigorous challenge to communication. I think we accept too many things, and I think that what's going to happen here is people are going to start, and they already are, questioning things that they heretofore maybe wouldn't question. And I think that's very healthy.
I don't disagree with you, but this is I think consistent with our conversation about a paradigm shift. I think we have entered a time, particularly with how we communicate with one another and algorithms and AI, that the amount of information we receive is it's so different than it before. The information is being feeded in a way that that a mind is going to be the thoughts will be populated, you know, through an algorithm like we've never can imagine before,
Yep.
versus say a newspaper or even a conversation. So I'm
Well, I
not
think
saying
it's,
it's bad, but I don't think we can extrapolate from a time before. I really think that we have entered a paradigm shift in technology and how we communicate as human beings. And this, I don't want to have another conversation about AI. I think we had that a couple weeks ago, but that will continue to be part of every part of our life.
yeah, I think what I'm hearing you say is that this notion of qualifying information and determining what the truth is has become a lot more challenging, and there's no question about that. That
Yeah.
doesn't
What I'm
doesn't
saying
mean
is what you said earlier, and I'm agreeing with you about these institutional changes. Mainstream media there is a paradigm shift in this last election. It is no longer trusted. We don't trust mainstream media, right? That is a major paradigm shift that will never go back to a time where we trusted again. They lost, kind of like the Democratic Party, right? People lost trust in what they were saying was truthful and believable. So,
Well, what's interesting is watching the accountability piece of this as
mhm.
people, how many people have resigned,
Tell
you
me
know,
more.
in anticipation of Donald Trump getting into office. But it's their positions. Whether they resign or not, it's their positions. It's like we're doing things now in reaction to this. Some of the reaction is, fuck Trump, we're going to make his job as difficult as possible between now and when he gets into office. And the other one is the opposite side of that. It's like, well, now we love him and we want to be his friend. And obviously the best position is probably somewhere in between, but watching people respond to being held accountable and watching people shift paradigm wise in the way that they think about institutions, people with titles, processes and systems within organizations. I find it just fascinating.
I do too. And you could also see that as the system working as it's designed to work, right? Or you could see it as hypocrites, or it is interesting though. And somebody made this point. I haven't verified it, that it's not uncommon when you have a shift in politics from, say, Republican Party versus a Democratic Party, that people will become become Republicans to keep their job. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking about bureaucrats. This is, mostly Washington and these other areas. So again, I don't know if that's true. I'd be interested in your opinion on that. To me, that would be hard. How can what does that say about the hypocrisy of that, right? If you're switching teams and then switching um, worldviews just because that's how you, I guess, stay employed.
Well,
Maybe that's.
I think there's a couple of groups there, right? Where there's more than a couple, but a couple that come to mind. One is
Mhm.
the genuine person that says, "Wow, I didn't know any of this stuff because I had my head in the sand, or I wasn't
Mhm.
listening, or I was watching the wrong news channel, or listening to
Mhm.
the wrong people, or whatever." And my goodness, now that I have all this context and all this data and all this evidence, I am going to shift my position, but it's based on all of this substantiation. And then
Mhm.
that I honor that group. God bless you guys. Good for you. Wish you knew sooner. Probably shouldn't have paid it. Whatever. I'm not going to fault you for that. Like the Mark Zuckerberg conversation, the guy's coming back around. He was limited by information, resources, all this other stuff. My
Mhm.
position was fuck him. Yours was, hey, let's give the guy a little credit. I think, and I can see both. But then there's
Mhm.
this other group of people that's just like, I'm switching because if I put this color on, I get to keep my job. And I don't really believe in anything. I don't really stand for anything. So this color looks good on me today. Like, fuck
Mhm.
those people. I think
Yeah.
I think there's a huge difference between those two groups.
Yeah. Well, let's also talk about the people that he was surrounded by at that time. Let's just use Mark Zuckerberg for example, right? Um, that's this. This is where I live, so I could speak firsthand about the type of people that went to work for those companies, their age, their ideology, and so there's a lot to say for that. Mark Zuckerberg is also what that would be 8 years older. He
Yep.
he was a young guy when
Mm-hmm.
that first election was going on,
Yep.
and he also he's I wouldn't say he's a chameleon. I don't think he switched ideologies. I think he had some experience, more seasoned as a person and as a businessman, and also got into MMA and some other stuff. So yeah,
Well, he
I
discovered
appreciate the guy. I really do.
yeah, he, no,
I don't see him as
yeah.
yeah.
No, I think he discovered a lot of stuff, and I think he's shifted based on discovery, and I think that's okay. I think shifting for no reason other than to grab power or maintain power is another thing altogether. But yeah, no, and Jim, I spent a lot of time, and you have too, with technologists.
Yeah,
And
I
I
have.
think technologists, in my experience, are much like doctors and lawyers in some regard. They feel as though they're a little bit better than we are. They're a little bit smarter than we are. They're a little bit pretentious. Not
Well,
all of them.
sometimes they have a reason to be. I'll be honest with you.
Yes.
You go to the school that long, and you make that much of a commitment something to something. You are. I'm not saying it's justified pretentiousness. Nobody wants that, but they have put themselves out. They made a huge sacrifice to get to that stage. They
But
deserve.
and you're right, and I agree with that. But there was a lot of holier than thou shit going on. Like,
Yeah,
this is not a law for us. This is a law for you guys. We don't have
yeah.
to adhere to this law, but we're going to make you, whether it's a mask on or going out in public or whatever.
Mhm.
Back to COVID, but yeah, pretension was contributed to a lot of this, and now a lot of those pretentious people are, the without clothing in public. You know.
Yeah, yeah. They're going away. So, well, happy New Year to you, Mark. I think 25 is going to be a good year, and look forward to another season 4 of the
Yeah, man.
Imperfect Men's
Happy New
Club.
Year to you and yours. I'm glad everybody got through it safely, and I am thoroughly confused but extremely optimistic.
Yeah, that's a good way to end it. All right, we'll talk to you
See
next
you,
week.
man.
See you.
Peace.